Hello and welcome to the Pretty Serious Bike Racing Podcast, Tour de France Daily Edition. We are in the middle of the Tour de France. It's very exciting. It's very exciting because it's the Tour de France, and that alone makes it exciting, but it's been a particularly exciting Tour de France, in my humble opinion. So there's so much to talk about today, and I am just thrilled. I'm over the moon to be able to talk with my bike racing analyst extraordinaire co-host, Cosmo Catalano. We did not do a show last week, Cosmo. It's been 2 weeks since I've video chatted with you, and it's just great to see you. How are you?
Yeah, good to see you too. Feeling good, feeling tired. Glad it's a rest day, but also thrilled even to be able to talk with you all here.
I'm also thrilled to be joined by a person who has been, well, we just haven't had him on the Pretty Serious show for a little while because he's very busy setting records, riding across his home country, covering the Tour de France as well.
Doing actual bike
Ronan
racing.
Mc Laughlin.
Yeah, conspicuous by my absence almost.
Definitely. Yeah, you're missed when you're gone, for sure. Although it's nice for the listeners that they can hear you on any number of other, podcasts because you're everywhere. So that's great.
Geek Warning is my true home, and I pop up every now and then, placeholders and here on the Pretty Serious. So
yeah, you're probably
you're just gonna have, if you do like my accent, which I can't understand why you might, you're gonna have to tune into all the podcasts to find out where and when you might hear me.
I think you're the most ubiquitous of Escape Collective podcasters. You or Kaylee. It's a close.
I'd say Kaylee probably takes that over. Yeah.
Well, before we continue, since I did just mention the Escape Collective, which is the podcast network we are coming to you from, let me just remind you before we go any further into this podcast that everything we do here in the podcasting world for Escape Collective and over at escapecollective.com, everything is supported by you, our members. If you are a member already, if you've signed up to support us, we are very grateful for you. And if you're not, we would just hope you could consider becoming one because it supports everything we do. Again, on the podcast network, it's this show. It's Tour de France Daily is what we're doing all month here, but the rest of the year, it's the Pretty Serious Bike Racing Podcast. It's Placeholders, it's Wheel Talk, and it's Geek Warning. And then, everything we do over at escapecollective.com. So whether that's tool stories from Dave Rome or news stories, whatever it is that Ian writes, however you classify those, it's all member funded, and we really just we hope you'll sign up. You can head on over to escapecollective.com/join and look into it. We hope you will. All right, on with the show. So it is the rest day at the 2023 Tour de France when we are recording, which means we have seen 9 stages of action so far. There's plenty to talk about there. There's also been the Giro Donne has been going on as well. That just ended. So we've got lots to look back on, to break down in the racing so far, and then we'll look ahead to what's coming up at the next week of the Tour de France as well. Let's just kick it off with the general conversation, general overarching thoughts. This has been, in my opinion, it's the best first week of a Tour de France that I have ever watched. And it's not that many Tours de France. I'm not that old, but it's enough that I think it's a pretty strong statement to say that. I don't know how you guys feel.
I was just going to contrarianly push back on the notion of a best first week. It doesn't have to be in competition. There can be multiple good first weeks that were very, very strong. But yeah, I agree. This was really well done. I think the only part I would take issue with was the racetrack finish. I thought that was silly, and I thought they probably could have anticipated some of that silliness and made it a little bit tougher earlier in the day just to give some reason to do something. I thought everybody, there was a lot of talk about it being sort of a de facto rest day, and I think this is true. They just needed 4-5 people to decide that they were willing to rest less than everyone else, and it just didn't come together. And then you had kind of a clown show in the finale. But outside of that, I agree. It was really well set up. Lots of opportunities for different riders. But the GC guys always had to be on guard. Just beautiful stuff.
I hadn't actually thought about it, Dane, until you mentioned it in the run sheet there, but I think I tend to agree with you. It's certainly one of the best opening weeks that springs to mind. I haven't gone back through all the tours that I've watched since 2003, but being a fan of time trials, I didn't think I'd be saying that, given that there was no prologue and no team time trial, which are usually staples of the opening week. I did miss those, but I thought the action that we did get was massively entertaining. It was exciting to watch. The stage on the racing circuit aside, we haven't seen as many big crashes and serious injuries and riders out of the tour as a result of that, which we typically do tend to see in the first week. And that was one of the big concerns I had coming into this week, with it starting in Bilbao in the Basque Country on what seemed like it was going to be narrower and more technical roads, and with the yellow jersey up for grabs at the end of the first stage. I thought that we might see even more sort of riders having to abandon the tour even during the first stage, and thankfully that didn't transpire, so that can only be a good thing. And what did transpire was actually hugely exciting racing, which you don't tend to get all that often in the first week.
I would think that Richard Carpas, Enric Mas, and Mark Cavendish would disagree with you, but importantly, Tadej Pogacar and Vingegaard
and others also,
and that is a big boon for them.
well, I mean, it's important that all riders are safe,
true,
but I mean, it just doesn't seem like the tour-defining carnage that we've seen in earlier years happened to the same extent this year.
I will say it is good that we have two competitive riders at the top of the GC right now. I think in past years it's never just been two at the first rest day, or it isn't typically two at the first rest day. So you kind of have a group of people who are looking good, and I kind of miss that little bit of speculation here. I think there will probably be a pretty good battle for the last step of the podium, but maybe if you have to complain about this first week, it was almost too selective.
I think what has made it exciting, and to that point, Cosmo, is the finish of each stage has, although we've had Philipsen sort of dominate the sprint stages, the finishes otherwise have been sort of edge of your seat stuff. And you had the Yates Brothers on the first stage, you've had the breakaway yesterday in Puy de Dôme, you've had all their sprint stages, you've had the Mads Pedersen stage, and all of them sort of, they were genuinely entertaining and exciting to watch. I'm not sure if entertaining is the right word. I don't feel right saying these guys are here to entertain us, but I think you know what I mean, in that the stages were interesting to watch, and there was no real snooze fest like we've had in other years.
Well, what are they here to do if not to entertain us? That's the point of what they're doing, right?
Yeah, but I don't feel right saying it, so yeah.
All right, fair enough.
I guess you could say our job is to entertain also. But
yeah, that's right. We're here to entertain. So Cosmo, I need you to be more sports talk radio. All right, we had a whole show about that, and yeah, I do think what you said reminded me. Kaylee Fretz said something the other day in the TDF Daily from the ground, which is that the interspersal of enough of the sprint stages here and there has probably really helped increase the excitement on the mountain stages. Because one thing that kind of kills the drama very often in the Grand Tour is when you put too many really hard stages back to back to back, and then riders just kind of wait, and particularly the GC riders will just kind of wait and see, maybe not go as hard as they otherwise would because they're afraid of going into the red too much before a hard stage. And I think there's been a really nice, and just to echo what Kaylee said, I think there's just been a really good interspersal of those flatter, quote unquote easy stages, easy for them, maybe not for us, where it has allowed them to recover some strength, and then they go hard the next day in the mountains.
Yeah, I think it's been a great mix. In terms of allowing the riders to go hard one day and recover the next, but also just in terms of you're never really getting that huge anticipation and build towards 3 days in the Pyrenees, which ultimately usually turns out to be a bit of an anticlimax. Instead, this year we've been getting here's a Pyrenean stage, and here's a sprint stage, and there's a few more mountains, and there's another sprint stage. And yeah, I think that has definitely helped.
And even the sprint stages that we have had, none of them have been more than 200 kilometers, so that's good. We haven't done any like 250K slogs, which is always nice. All right, so far, what are What are y'all's? What are you guys' favorite moments so far? Uses. What are Uses' favorite moments so far in this tour? I kind of asked you guys to kind of maybe come up with some favorites so far. So there's just a couple of other talking points. For me, I'll start. For me, I actually really, really enjoyed the moment a few days into the race when, after having lost a significant amount of time to Jonas Vingegaard on stage 5, the very next day, Tadej Pogačar came back and put not as much time, but a hefty amount of time into him the very next day. To me, that moment when he dropped Vingegaard, it was a moment of, oh, okay, we have a battle on our hands. We got a tour on our hands. And I think there was some concern after he lost all that time early that maybe Vingegaard was going to run away with it. And very quickly, he bounced back and has since grabbed more time back. And I think just that moment on stage 6, climbing to Cauterets, that Cat 1 finishing climb when he was able to get clear, I just remember thinking, all right, this is going to be a good tour. We're good.
I think that single moment not only helped make everything we just spoke about the first week being so exciting, but also just ensured that the rest of the tour, well, maybe not the rest of the tour, but at least for the foreseeable future, that it's going to be exciting also in that, as you said, it wasn't down to a one-horse race already. There was still some competition there, so I tend to agree with you on that moment. My own personal moment of the tour so far has been Victor Lafay's one on stage 2. Of course, we have our fantasy league going, and I had picked Pogačar for the stage you just mentioned, Dane, that he went on to win, so I was delighted with that. But I was even more delighted with Victor Lafay's stage 1 because I had also tipped him for that stage. So that I was aboard a flight that was slightly delayed, about to take off, heading home from the Tour de France, when the riders were coming into the final kilometre, knowing I had picked Victor Lafay. I, of course, was rooting for him. I'd seen him in the group, and when he attacked with a K to go, you can imagine my excitement. And bear in mind, I was sitting on the second row of the plane here, so when he made it to the finish line, just about held on for the win. It was all I could do not to jump up and celebrate his win in the middle of a crowded Ryanair flight.
I was extremely impressed when you sent me that message to say that you'd picked him. That's a good pick right there. Yeah,
I thought it was fairly obvious given how good he was the day before.
He was good the day before, but I mean, how many riders are good one day and then terrible the next day, especially if they're not Tadej Pogačar or Jonas Vingegaard, you know?
And as I had said, I think to our colleague Johnny Long the day before, I wouldn't say he was slightly flattered the day before because he was in a good position, and the nature of that climb and the nature of the fans on the road made it very, very difficult to move up. Kind of wherever you entered the portion of the climb where the selection was made was kind of where you stayed if you had the legs. But that's the key point. He had the legs to follow Pogačar and Jonas Vingegaard, and that sort of told me that, I mean, it told me that he was a safe pick for the following day, and that he probably wasn't going to get dropped in that final climb, and he was probably going to pick up some points. And much like I was thinking with the first day where I'd picked Mike Woods, it was like, who can I pick here who's going to be strong enough climber not to, to score some points, and might not ultimately go for the win. But I can't profess to have predicted a win. I was more sort of thinking this guy's going to score some high points today, and the win just topped it all off. I mean, for Cofidis also, like, when was the last time? I can't remember the last time I seen Cofidis win a stage. And
they've been hunting for what, 15 years? I think it was. Yeah.
I think it was totally switching back to look bikes, especially with the La Vie Claire throwback they have on there now. That's, to my mind, that is really the only thing that changed between the futility and the success. Clearly the determining factor.
I'm really waiting on Arkea Samsic to nab a win with the Bianchis, and they have not really done much so far, and it's kind of bumming me out.
They had some handlebars break. That was cool.
Well, okay, that's even worse. Oh well. Cosmo, do you have a favorite moment so far?
Yeah, I hate to put it right there. I'm gonna go with two. I'm gonna do two moments. One was yesterday on Puy de Dôme, where we had Vingegaard and Pogačar racing in a way that we didn't expect. I think there's been a lot of, in addition to the closeness of their battle, I think there's been a lot of them doing atypical things. When we ended up with that small group after Sepp Kuss fell off, I was kind of immediately like, okay, this is just going to devolve into a series of attacks that Vingegaard is going to have to chase back, and probably Simon Yates or Pidcock will win the stage. And instead, we had the punchy, explosive guy just go as hard as he possibly could and barely ride Vingegaard off his wheel. It was really fascinating to rewatch that stage and kind of look at the time gaps at each of those 100-meter to go paintings on the road, because it really fluctuated a lot, anywhere between 4 and 10 seconds through the last finale. And I can't remember having, especially between these two, such a tight battle, and very kind of atypical, because you really think of Pogacar, this guy who's going to explode, get bonus points. This finish, if he couldn't get 10 seconds, I didn't even think he was really going to contest it, because it would be a ton of work to try and to get that little gap, and he went after it anyway. And that was cool to see. I also thought the Pedersen stage win was really good, in that we had Trek just go to the front and almost do, not quite like a Cipollini lead out. It wasn't really that type of finish, but it really took control of the front race for most of the final kilometers. And it wasn't quite a lead out. At the end, they did have to drop Pedersen off and have him figure his own way out to the line. But after the clown show on the racetrack, it was nice to see that, we're going to do this. We're going to set the terms here. The rest of you can try and figure out a way to win, but we're pretty confident that the Metz can finish this off. And that's, something I haven't seen in a little bit. So,
when you say clown show, are you referring to the entire peloton on the racetrack, or specifically Lidl Trek's new kit?
No. Just everybody. I think there's equal blame to be shared between the promoters and the racers on that racetrack finish. But I actually am kind of a fan of the kits. They really remind me a lot of the old Swatch watches from the 80s and 90s, with a lot of kind of blocked primary colors in a way that is seemingly random, but also intentional and artful. I'm
coming around on them. I really like Trek Segafredo's old kit. I thought it looked really classy. But the new color, I'm coming around.
I've just shared a photo with you guys of the clown suit that the new Trek kit reminds me of, but that's probably
that's gonna make it hard for me to enjoy it. Actually, you know what? Now that I'm looking at it, I don't mind the color scheme. It's
it fits a little bit better.
Some green, orange, yellow, blue, and red
versus the clown suit you sent.
Yeah. All right. What about unheralded riders? This is a segment that we sometimes do every now and then. I feel like the Tour de France seems like a pretty good time to do it. I for one, I feel as if, for sort of different reasons, I feel that both of the Yates brothers deserve a little bit more heralding after 9 stages of the Tour de France. So I'm going to kick us off by saying that I think, first of all, Adam Yates has done a pretty admirable job of being option B, co-leader, I guess, over at UAE. I think after 9 stages, so he's 4.5 minutes down, which conceivably close enough that should his team really, really want to try, I don't think they will, but it would be cool if they did, some sort of Jonas Vingegaard, Primož Roglič, fire off all the attacks and put your rival under pressure, like Jumbo did to Tadej Pogacar last year. I think it's a possibility that they'll be able to do it. Now, neither Yates brother has really been able to keep up with the two big favorites of this tour, the Pogacar and the Vingegaard kind of lead group. But both of them have been there, or thereabouts, as the Brits like to say. And I think Adam Yates has been a really strong second rider who I'm hoping they will use, and he's put himself in position to be used this way as part of a two-pronged attack. And then Simon Yates, I feel like, is really flying under the radar because he didn't win a stage the way that Adam did. And if I'm looking at the top 10 here, all due respect to Jai Hindley, I feel like Simon is maybe my pick to finish on the podium at this point. Hindley's kind of been going backwards a little bit since his really great stage 5.
Still pretty impressive.
Yeah, still very impressive, sure. But obviously he went from winning a stage and wearing the yellow jersey to losing a significant amount of time in only a handful of days to the two leaders. And I don't know. I know we have a lot of Australian listeners who are probably going to be upset with me for saying this. I don't know that I trust Jai Hindley to hold on all the way through the next 2 weeks here. But I do think that Simon Yates may be a little bit more likely with the climbs to come. We'll see. Anyway, regardless, I think he's been really strong, sort of flying under the radar as a top 10 contender here. And I think, yeah, both Yates brothers, maybe for different reasons, deserve a little bit more heralding.
You've already sort of touched on it there, Dane, but I was planning to ask you, so I'm going to go ahead and ask you anyway. Do you think Adam Yates has stayed close enough to be, like, will he be happy at 4.5 minutes, or will the team be happy at 4.5 minutes? I would have been thinking that ideally, you know, they're probably expecting him to lose some time to the dynamic duo, but they maybe wanted him to be closer than that, just to be a little bit more useful, to be able to play that card. 4.5 minutes is, you know, it's the sort of territory where Jumbo don't have to, you know, panic chase, which is probably what UAE would be hoping if they're going to play that card.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to be happy in terms of him, you know, being close enough to attack on a final climb. But he is still in a position where he can attack on a second climb out, and that will, or you know, try to get into the early breakaway. Which again, that's similar to what we saw at the Grand Isle stage last year from Jumbo, where Roglic was like, I think he was almost 3 minutes down. And yeah, if Roglic goes on the final climb to 500 meters from the line, then who cares? But if you go from couple of hours out in the stage, that's a whole different story. And I think they still have that card to play if they want to. I don't know that they will, but that is still in play. Yeah, it's not great to be 4+ minutes back, but I think it's enough that he's not going to, if he gets into a breakaway, that will cause some consternation with Jumbo-Visma.
I think it's also part of it is he's playing a dual role, right? He's their second GC guy for sure, the co-leader bit, but he's also been working to set up Pogačar in a couple of stages this tour. And he's doing, I think, a pretty good job of that kind of contrary role of work really hard and exhaust yourself for your leader, but also don't lose too much time. You could kind of see him. He'll make a lead. He'll make an attack. He'll set up. He'll raise the pace. Pogačar will go, and you'll see Yates in the background, like struggling to grab onto Sepp Kuss's wheel. And I think all things considered, he's doing a pretty good job. I can't imagine being the team and being upset with his performance.
Does anyone else come to mind as an unheralded fellow that we should herald?
I was just going to say Pidcock. I think his performance yesterday was especially good. He may be on that plan of riding himself into this tour. You know, he was a little bit tough on himself at the finish, giving an interview sitting on the grass with a gorgeous view of the whatever region of France that is. But he was like, you know, yeah, I did really well, but who's going to remember the 4th GC group finisher today? Like, I was like, well, I saw you in that group and I was pretty impressed. I think they're still probably better off working with Carlos Rodriguez, but it was after a pretty anonymous Tour de Suisse. It was nice to see him perform pretty well with the top contenders on a super tough day.
Yeah, I fully believe in Pidcock as a GC rider of the future, and I was a little disappointed that he didn't make me look smart at the Tour de Suisse when I had kind of said that. So at least he's kind of bounced back to do it here so far.
I don't think he's been at his best in this tour yet, but yesterday I was. I don't want to say even pleasantly surprised, because I wasn't all that surprised to see him in the sort of final selection, but at the same time, it's not really in keeping with the performances we've seen from him throughout the opening week. So in some ways, I was surprised. I'm with you, Dane. I've been calling him as a potential GC contender for at least a year or more now. First, sort of jokingly, because I didn't really have the confidence to say it that I meant it, but I definitely did mean it. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised to see him ride so well yesterday. I think he's only going to get better as this tour goes on, and I do think Ineos are at this tour very much with Carlos Rodriguez and Tom Pidcock first Tour de France going for GC sort of ambitions, in that, you know, let's, without using the old cliche, let's take it stage by stage, see how these guys, you know, they're still young, first time contending the GC in the tour for both of them. Let's see how far they can go. And of course Pidcock went to stage, I don't know, he went into the second week last year in the top 10 in the white jersey, and so presumably he was only keeping that warm for Pogačar, if I remember correctly, but nevertheless he was wearing the white jersey last year. And so I think he'll be looking to go a step further this year and possibly take home a top 10 overall. Given that Cosmo's already said Pidcock, though, and he was my unheralded rider, I'm going to go for, well, not really another unheralded rider, but I think Team UAE have been a little unheralded in that they've actually maybe got a little excited in the first couple of stages where they maybe did too much too soon, but in the mountains, they're obviously not there when Pogacar and Vingegaard do their thing and disappear up the road, but they do seem to have strength in numbers. A couple of times you've seen Pogacar disappear up the road or Vingegaard disappear up the road, and UAE have 3 or 4 riders in close proximity should they be needed, should Pogacar have a bad moment. And I think that bodes well for the rest of the Tour. And the other unheralded, not really so much rider, but the unheralded thing, let's say, from the opening week of the Tour was that finish on Puy de Dôme yesterday. And not the climb itself, but just the sort of makeshift approach to the podium that they had assembled on top of the climb, and the riders lying around on the grass after the finish, and just the kind of stuff that you see at a good old-fashioned bike race, and not really the kind of stuff you see at the Tour de France these days. So that was nice change to see yesterday.
Yeah, I think there were a bunch of weird things about that finish, and we've heard a bunch of different people, photographers, journalists, whatever, talking about how unusual it was up there with no fans, and having to just experience that finish with really nobody cheering as the riders reach the line.
It was as if somebody had mixed up the camera feed and they had broadcast the Tour de Austria live. Which is also happening at the moment, I think, because there was just no fans in the final 3-4 kilometers of the final climb, which was bizarre for a Tour de France finish.
Yeah. All right, one last talking point. Looking back at the Tour so far, I'm wondering what your collective opinions, y'all's uses opinions, on something that I think I'm kind of thinking that Jumbo-Visma might have missed their opportunity. I think there was obviously a day, stage 5, where Tadej Pogacar was on the back foot. And I think Jumbo-Visma probably came into this race knowing that they were going to have to hit Pogacar hard early on this very difficult, in this very difficult first week, because he's coming back from a broken wrist and he didn't have the same buildup that he was hoping for. I kind of feel like they didn't put enough time in him on stage 5. And now, is he ever going to finish behind Vingegaard again? It seems to me like 1 minute, the minute they put into him, or whatever it was exactly, wasn't enough. And now, like, you've awakened the giant. You've brought out Tadej Pogacar. He's healthy. He's in form. And I'm just wondering, did they play the first week right? Did they do everything they could and it just didn't work out? Yeah. What do we think?
They did a whole reel on this on Instagram, whereas I wouldn't say they missed their chance, but I think they definitely had an opportunity to gain more time. I think on stage 5, the big question mark for me was dropping Wout back out of the front of the race to go pace Vingegaard up the climb when Vingegaard still had plenty of teammates, including Sepp Kuss. I think they had 2 riders up the road. They didn't really use Benoit at all, but I mean, I think Vingegaard made the right time for his attack. Like, I think if it's do something with Benoit or attack around the super narrow section with cars and lots of riders getting caught from the breakaway, the right thing to do is make that opportunistic attack. I just think he did so much work by himself over the top of that climb, descending into the finish. Nobody worked with him. If Wout could make it to the top of that climb to do 3 turns on the flat section, like, that could be 15 or 20 seconds just because he's Wout and he can crush himself, and it's way more efficient for him to crush himself on the flat ground versus going up a hill where Sepp Kuss can crush himself going up a hill for Vingegaard. But I wouldn't necessarily say they missed a chance. I think they could have done a little better, but all things considered, they're leading the race. They haven't lost any time. They look competitive. They've definitely been successful getting good riders into breaks to make UAE work. They probably can't do that now that they're leading the race. But all together, I think they've been doing all right.
Yeah, 100% agree with you, Cosmo. I think they made the most of the situation that presented itself. They made the attack. They took time on Pogacar. Will that be enough? Ultimately the next 2 weeks will decide, but I think they did the best they could with the situation they had. in this first week. I do also agree though that perhaps they could have used Van Aert better on that stage 5. And there was a bit of back and forth in one of our WhatsApp groups during that stage. What is White's plan for today's ride? And I was convinced he was there to try and be, I think I said, a locomotive after the climb to drive Vingegaard either in chasing Pogačar or in driving clear of Pogačar, and ultimately. Whether it was that because he dropped back, he didn't have enough time to make it over the climb, he thought it would be better to use him earlier. I don't know, but I do know at one point earlier in that stage, I think Jumbo were on the front and Van Aert was riding in the break, and it's like, had Jumbo not ridden in the bunch that time, maybe he would have had the time to get over that climb. Maybe he could have been in more assistance to Vingegaard on the other side of the climb rather than on it. But ultimately, they had to take time out of Pogačar in this first week, and they did. And now it appears that Pogačar is bouncing back, and it ultimately, that makes for a pretty exciting next 2 weeks. I dare say Pogačar may have one more bad day in him, just given the fact that he hasn't had the preparation and the build-up that he ideally would have liked. And at this level, over the course of 3 weeks, especially when it's these two guys duking it out, you got to imagine at some point there's maybe some lack of resilience or whatever in Pogačar's form or condition right now that might come back to haunt him. And that's not really anybody's fault. That's just the fact that he's recovering from injury and couldn't do the training that he would have ideally liked to do, I'd assume. 2
points. First of all, Ronan, again, this is sports talk radio, all right? So it's totally Pogačar's fault. He shouldn't have crashed. What was he thinking? It's all his fault. Second of all,
I thought I was about to get told off for audio problems or something again. But anyway, go on.
All right. The other thing I was going to say is that we will look ahead to what is coming in the second week in a moment. But first, let's jump over to the Giro Donne, which finished yesterday. And Abby Mickey, with her Wheel Talk segments in the TDF Daily, I think covered things pretty comprehensively. And she has also finished just now a look back at the whole race. So we'll have plenty of coverage from Abby on the Giro Donne that you can listen to get the full comprehensive picture. She had, a bunch of different sources on the ground sending her audio diaries, which was really cool. And watching the race very closely with her analytical perspective already. But we should talk about a few takeaways from the Giro Donne, because I think there were some that we can get pretty serious about. The big overarching takeaway, I think, from the Giro Donne is Annemiek van Vleuten is back at the perfect time of the year. Obviously, the Tour de France Femme has really taken over the important section of the calendar. I think a lot of riders, and Van Vleuten is obviously one of them, really wanting to do well at the Tour de France Femme. Van Vleuten did not have the best spring she's had. Not a huge surprise. She's retiring soon. But she's clearly in good shape ahead of the Tour de France Femme after the Giro Donne, where she just crushed everybody in the general classification, almost 4 minutes ahead of runner-up Juliette Labute. Gaia Rialini was 4:23 back, so there really was no contest in the overall at the Giro Donne, where Annemiek van Vleuten won not only the general classification, but also the points and the mountains classifications. She was obviously just on another level at this race, and perfect timing with the Tour de France Femme right around the corner. I think it's really going to be a battle between her and Demi Vollering.
I agree she's looked better than she has this year, but I question whether this is a performance that indicates how things will go at the Tour de France Femme. I think Van Vleuten really got away with a lot of things at this race that would not be possible in a more structured and competitive race environment. I think this race was extremely hard. I think it was raced extremely hard, and that plays really well into her hands. There wasn't a ton of team coordination. There were many opportunities to take time on Van Vleuten. She crashed herself for no apparent reason other than she wasn't paying attention heading into one of the climbs. She's kind of attacked almost nonsensically with the sole goal of getting another stage win. She put in a 25K time trial to beat Lorena Wiebes by 17 seconds. That is not GC solid, well thought out GC behavior. Granted, it's hard to take too much issue with someone who won a race by so much, but the second places in GC throughout this race had incredibly poor luck. One of them crashed out pretty gruesomely. Another one got just solidly dropped on the second day. We missed a lot of coverage too. We missed her Van Vloten's initial attack that got her into the pink jersey, so we can't really say what happened there. It's later on the run sheet, but I also think SD Works came into this less determined to crush everything than they normally do. I think it was more of a trial run in training for them as a squad. I mean, Vibus dropped out pretty early in the race because she was really just there for training. So I think Van Vleuten looked great. I think she looked better than she should based on all the other conditions.
I think that's a fine point. I mean, the field as well was missing the other best climber in the world right now, Demi Vollering, and so it's hard to say really how she would have stacked up there. We'll see that soon at the Tour de France Femme. We should talk about SD Works because I think coming into this race, every time we've talked about SD Works, my constant refrain on this podcast has been, and look, they didn't just do it with Demi Vollering, they did it with everybody else. Because Demi Vollering, by herself seems capable of dominant performances, but so often we've seen this year that SD Works also has other riders, and it's very impressive that all of them are able to, they already have done this at races, divvy up the stage wins amongst themselves, every single one of them getting a stage win and filling out the entire podium. And to me, the big takeaway from this race was, okay, well they don't have Demi Vollering in a climber-friendly race, in a stage race. They're still really good. They still, Glankovac won an impressive stage, and they did fine. They were still there, but they were not nearly the dominant squad that we have seen them be when Demi Vollering is leading the way, when they have that, top-tier leader. And, when Lorena Vibus decides to peace out a little bit early. And, so in general, I think we did see a slightly more vulnerable SD Works because at the end of the day, Demi Vollering does make a huge difference for this team. But, of course, she'll be there at the Tour de France Femme. So who knows whether... I don't think we're going to see much of a vulnerable team there. I think we're going to see a stronger SD Works there.
I was going to say, I completely agree. I think Kaylee has adopted the phrase, we raced like juniors, from the Pro Peloton earlier this season to indicate that a race is hard and disordered. And I think this race was hard, and I think they raced like juniors, and I think that is... Annemiek van Vleuten is ready to throw down for any junior race title anytime. And I think if you get a more structured approach to the stage, where she can't just ride hard, or where there's going to be penalties for riding hard just for the sake of maybe getting a stage over a sprinter, I think we'll see SD Works really, because they've been so dominant. I think a lot of people were kind of looking in their direction, like watching their kids, seeing what they're up to, and I think. I think Niamh Fisher-Black probably wanted to perform better than she did at this race, but she still... There was a lot of stuff where I feel like in a more structured event she might have performed better. A few attacks she just kind of missed and couldn't catch the wheel. But yeah, I think this is all part of the same chaotic pasta bowl that is the Giro Donne. It's just the things that have really defined the season weren't present here for a variety of reasons, and so. I look to a stronger SD Works at the Tour.
Yeah, Annemiek van Vleuten showing up in that environment does seem to be a pretty difficult to defeat opponent. Fortunately, we won't have long to wait to see her going up against Demi Vollering and anybody else with their eye on the Tour de France Femme. And in contrast to maybe a 3-week back-to-back run, the Giro Donne is not short, but I would imagine Van Vleuten still has enough in the tank to go for the Femmes. I think she's going to have some fatigue in the legs, but there's enough of a gap here in between the two, and it's not 3 weeks. So I'm hopeful that we'll get that battle, because I think we've seen at the men's Tour de France that having two heavy hitters going at it every day is makes for an entertaining race. All right, let's talk about what's coming up at the Tour de France Homme. We've got a similarly hard week, too. I think generally what you often get at the Tour de France is a very staircase-esque buildup of tension. And this is a different year where the first week was very hard. So it's not like we're going to go from ground floor to a much harder second week. We're just going to stay difficult. I think that there's some sprinter stages in the second week, but overall the actual altitude gain that they're going to be doing is pretty significant. And there are some very hard stages coming up to look forward to. So I think, I can't wait for the second week to get underway. We've got, coming out of the first rest day, there is going to be a breakaway-friendly stage that starts at a theme park. You should listen to Jose Bean's segment on that in yesterday's Tour de France Daily. Going to finish at Issoire after a bunch of up and down all day long. It just looks like a perfect breakaway stage. But yeah, enough up and down to maybe be a little bit fatigue-inducing. The next stage looks very sprinter-friendly. Another breakaway day to follow that. And then the GC guys will really come to the fore because stage 13 climbs the Grand Colombier. There's a interestingly uncategorized, Kelly called it a lump in his stage-by-stage guide. I think that's a good word for it. Lump on stage 13 before the Grand Colombier. And then they just go right up the Grand Colombier, which is a very hard climb. I don't think I'm breaking any news there. 17.4K at 7.1% average grade. It's got some very steep sections, so that should be pretty entertaining. And then there will not be much time to rest after that Bastille Day stage 13, because stage 14 then goes up and over, well, a bunch of really hard climbs, culminating with a Cat 1 hard descent into the Col des Jouplins, which is an Or category climb, and then a descent to the finish line. So again, another really hard stage.
I know we've been talking about Jumbo maybe missing chances. I expect that at some point this week, Jumbo will try to pull something with riders up the road. And somebody on Escape Collective, I think it was Dane Cash, wrote a pretty good article about the conventional wisdom that Jumbo is a stronger team than UAE. And I think UAE has done a lot of the things you kind of predicted in the article, not being that much noticeably under strength relative to Jumbo. But I think that Jumbo's ability to get riders up the road on this stage, it's also super short, 150 kilometers, lots of climbs. I think that there will be some GC action here, and I hope Pogačar is ready for it.
First of all, thank you for, giving me the compliments there. I appreciate that. Second of all, I was actually really happy to see UAE do that first couple of days, and seeing Adam Yates get that stage win and get the yellow jersey, I thought, hey, that makes me look smart. So I was very pleased with that. We did talk about how the first week had some sprint stages interspersed. The second week has 3 really hard mountain stages in a row because the following stage, stage 15, more climbing. Yeah, not going to be an easy one with a bunch of climbs, a bunch of up and down all day, and then they finish at Saint-Gervais-Mont Blanc. The name Saint-Gervais-Mont Blanc, it's a little bit of a misnomer. They don't actually climb the top of Mont Blanc, which is like the tallest mountain in the Alps or anything like that, but it's still pretty hard, and it's got a very steep finish. So for 3 days in a row, riders will be going up and over these very challenging climbs. Hopefully we will get GC action. Hopefully there will not be the dreaded, let's keep the powder dry because of the hard stages ahead. Stage 13 finishing on the Colombier, stage 14 finishing with that Or category Col de Jouplin, and then the climb to Saint-Gervais-Mont Blanc. That's 3 hard days in a row, and I think we're going to see, first of all, we're definitely going to see some riders crack. I think there are riders in the top 10 who are going to finish like 20 minutes down with the pace that Sepp Kuss will be setting for Jumbo-Visma. And that's what we got before that first rest day. So lots of GC action to come. And before we close it out, I kind of wanted to do my favorite thing, which is ask Cosmo for predictions. I also like asking Ronan for predictions. He's quite good at it, as we've just heard on the show. I just know Cosmo doesn't like doing it, so that's why I like asking him. So at this point of the race, after one week, quote unquote, 9 stages of racing, who's going to win the yellow jersey? I still think it's Pogačar. Cosmo?
I picked Pogačar. I can't change.
Cosmo's just going to tell us the rider with the least accumulated time is going to win the yellow jersey.
No, he's on board for the sports talk radio. I think he's here for this. I believe in him.
Yeah, it's going to come down. So Pogačar, he's got the momentum, but I think Vingegaard He's still in the lead of the race. It's going to come down to whoever wants it more. There. Is
Oh,
that
there
good
we go.
enough?
Whoever wants it
Sports
more
Talk
is
Radio
classic.
for you?
That's great. Yeah. Yeah.
At what point do you think one decides they don't want it anymore?
Paris?
Yeah, maybe. The Monday after Paris, yeah. I think it's... I'm going to really hype the excitement here, but I think it's too close to call at the moment. Pogacar does have the momentum. Vingegaard does have the jersey, but I think neither can be anyway confident that they have enough to really be sure they can take the one at the moment. It's just too close to call, and I think both are going to have real good days to come. Both are going to have difficult days to come, and that's what hopefully is going to make it so exciting. And not to contradict what I said or we said earlier, but I think it's actually part of the reason this tour has been so exciting is because we are getting the battle we wanted between these two riders. Had one of these two riders not been here, and you look at the gap to the other riders in the top 10, actually this could possibly be one of the least exciting tours ever. So hopefully we see more of that battle in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, most importantly, I feel like the tour needs both of these riders to stay healthy. They need to stay upright. They need to not get COVID. They need that's going to make or break the entertainment level of the rest of this tour. But yeah,
everybody touch wood.
Yeah, I got a wooden desk. We're good. Yep. All right, maybe a little bit more interesting because I think it's there's more to say maybe at this point. What about the polka dots? I mean it's a strong bias because the guy wearing polka dots hails from the same country, but I'm loving the battle of the polka dots that Neilson Powless has given us so far. So I guess to me the question is, will Neilson Powless stay in the polka dots all the way through the race? Will somebody else who's been in the breakaways grab it? Or will Tadej Pogacar or Jonas Vingegaard run away with it in the end?
I think Powless, I've enjoyed his run. I think he's doing a lot of work for not that many points. I'm pretty sure Felix Gall is going to win it. Ashe Desire has nothing else to live for.
Nothing else to live for? Not even race, just live. That is strong.
He will probably win a mountain stage somewhere on the tour. He's looks, if it's possible, better than he looked at Tour de Suisse. He looked really good at Tour de Suisse. I think he's really just going to target the big points, the big climbs, and that stage win, and I think that will get him the polka dots, maybe outside of a concerted effort for it. Though he's kind of been in it. He's been in the mix. He's got a day in the jersey so far. But yeah, I mean, if he decides to take that jersey competition, I think he will.
I'm with you, Cosmo. I have spent the first week wondering, is this the best use of Neilson Powless? Because he's certainly a rider who could target a stage win, which ultimately, I know Magnus Cort did the same last year, targeted the polka dot early on and still got a stage win later in the race. But, just watching Powless out there on those opening stages in every break, burning up the legs, yeah, I don't know if that is going to equate to KOM jersey at the end of this tour. I think there's just too many points left on the road to fight for, and I also think it could end up costing him a stage win later in the race. And yeah, for me, it's between Felix Gall and also Mike Woods if he decides to go that direction. I think we've seen how good he was yesterday in that breakaway, won the stage, and at 20 minutes down in GC, he is going to have the freedom to go on more breaks like that, and presumably with a stage win already in the bank, the pressure's entirely off. He can just take it as it comes, and presumably take a lot of KOM points as it comes.
Yeah, a couple of points on that. First of all, just to anybody out there listening who thinks that we're going to just show all kinds of bias towards the North Americans, because there's two of us on this call, I just would like to note we've barely talked about Matteo Jorgensen, Neilson Powless, and Mike Woods, being the main protagonists of a very impressive stage. So clearly we are unbiased, neutral observers. Very impressive rides.
I'd say you're as biased as it gets.
Probably, yeah. Clearly impressive rides by all of them, by the way. I think Woods is a really good pick for the Mountains jersey, just because he showed yesterday that he is extremely strong at this race. He had a rougher day earlier on that he attributed to fueling, and he looked really good on the Puy de Dôme. And then the other thing is, I think I'm curious to know whether there's an impact of Netflix here. where Vaughters and company are saying, if we fight for the polka dot the whole race, we are going to get all over Netflix. We're gonna be on so many episodes as we fight, even if we don't get it, and even if it doesn't
Netflixification. I mean, is that not what the tour has been all along? Anyway, it's like it's just we've swapped now from it being the invited French teams who are in the doomed breaks and looking for the scraps from the yellow jersey table, and now it's actually every team,
or at least the ones with Netflix cameras.
Yes, every team with Netflix cameras, I should probably say,
yeah.
who are not fighting for the yellow jersey.
Yep. All right. Lastly, the points jersey. I'm actually super impressed that Jasper Philipsen has done so much to really solidify his lead. He is a rider who, he's been really good so far in the points, and I don't really see anybody at this point overhauling him in that classification, since Wout van Aert has not really been going as hard as he usually has.
Jasper has been a disaster for everybody else hoping to win the green jersey. And speaking of the Netflix effect, like when my wife heard that he won, I think it was after he won his first stage, she was delighted for him because she felt that he was hard done by in the Netflix series. So I think he's gained a lot of fans following the Unchained.
I will say he is probably skating on pretty thin ice with the race jury. They may in fact be looking for a reason to relegate him now. I don't think he's done anything super terrible, but I think he's done enough things where you're kind of like, well, that there may be a makeup call against him at some point in the future if he leaves that opportunity open.
It's one of those
Which could
things
hurt
where
his points run.
I feel like Nasser Bouhanni, like over the years, accumulated a lot of bad will, so that anytime he would do anything, relegate him. And then other riders who didn't do something bad over the last 5 days, if they snuck it up, an argy-bargy here or there, they do get to kind of slide. So that's a good point. All right. I feel like we have sufficiently been pretty serious, about the bike racing today. I hope you listening at home agree. Hopefully you've had a chance to watch what has been a fantastic Tour de France thus far. And fortunately for all of us, we still have lots of racing to come. We still have 2 weeks on the men's side, and then there's a whole Tour de France Femme after that. So we will have all kinds of coverage to come here on the Escape Collective podcast network. The Tour de France dailies will continue with more insight from the ground tomorrow on Tuesday as the race resumes. And there's all kinds of things to look forward to, both in the race and here on the podcast network and over at escapecollective.com, which you should go check out if you haven't done so yet. Thanks for listening, and Cosmo and Ronan, thanks for the delightful chat, and we'll see you guys soon.